I'm DJ.
And I'm Andrew.
Welcome to One Shot Tavern,
a TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. And today we are talking more Zine Quest. We are joined by Princess Woy, also known as Waffle, and your project is known as Realms Etria. This is a fantastic looking Kickstarter, a part of Zine Quest as a whole. If this is your first Zine Quest episode, the month of February is all about, at least over in Kickstarter and BackerKit and a couple different places, Zine Month is all about putting out these RPG products into the world, getting people to get eyes on it, back it, and be a part of that story. DJ and I launched our own last year. Mine is launched and live right now. DJ's is coming later this month. And today we are focused in on Princess and your story and your game and jumping into first-time publishing. Welcome to the podcast.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I said it before we started recording, but I was super attracted, as always, to the art of this right away because if you guys aren't watching the video of this on Kickstarter, it was one of those thumbnails that I was like, wait, what's that? I click in on it and it's this cute little, correct me if I'm wrong, moth insectoid person looking up at a really cute floating city with cottages around, and I was like, the tone, the vibe, the weirdness, it had a lot going for it right away, which is what you want in a thumbnail like that. So give me the pitch for your game. What is Realms Etria?
Oh, it's hard to do a short pitch, but I'll give a little bit of background.
You don't have to. You have a whole podcast.
Yeah, you got plenty of time. Tell us.
Okay, so the background is, as every tabletop role-playing game designer starts out, you play some role-playing games, you don't like exactly what they're doing, and you want to modify. And so I started out with, D&D. That's what I was introduced to a couple years ago. And then being a GM was, a bit too hard, so I moved a bit to Numenera, which has the cipher system, which is less difficult in coming up with things, but still, I didn't having to come up with stuff beforehand to then present to players. So then I thought, I'm moving in. I was getting out of university as well, graduating. So we kind of split our own ways, and then I explored solo tabletop role-playing games. And even there wasn't things, it wasn't exactly how I wanted it. I really loved Colossal, which I think is a big name in solo tabletop role-playing games. But I wanted a bit more meat than Colossal could give. And then with Ironsworn, which I haven't played, but I've read it, I still want a little bit more of a grander story to tell than I can get with Ironsworn. So my game, Realms Etria, is all about crafting a story. So it kind of takes you away a bit from the perspective of just role-playing as a single character. And instead, it's just try to tell a fun story through this way of setting up a chapter. So you outline a story before you play through it. So it kind of gets over that hump in some solo games where you're kind of I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing next? Because you plan it out a bit beforehand.
That's amazing because it's okay, here's your story structure for how a chapter should progress. Figure out kind of where it's going, and then everybody knows, so everyone's it's almost like you're scripting but without scripting. It's here's the outline, these are the things that we would like to accomplish in this session. I love that.
Well, and you're solo, so it's if you're kind of just making your task list and to-do list of where you want to explore creatively, and then you do it. I got to highlight to our listeners that have been around for a while, definitely know this about us, but you don't. That's almost the exact same arc in tabletop role playing for us. We both started out in D&D, and then we moved over to Cypher and ran that for a long time. And that was when I was it broke my brain and rewired how I thought about running a game. I was oh, I don't roll dice, and there were just different things about it and the ways that things could be so simplified, yet still there was plenty of robust story. And yeah, and then, then you realize there's a whole world of so many games. And we've had a couple people that do solo games on, like most notably like Astra Prisma. But like we both are fascinated by solo games, but have had virtually no time to invest in them.
Yeah.
I've maybe played I played Rune by Spencer Campbell a couple times. But I haven't gotten a chance to crack open Astro Prisma yet. So what drew you towards more solo game focused stuff and then breaking outside of that to make sure it's still collaborative or at least could go either way? What was your thought there?
So I think for me, wanting to play solo games came out because I was a bit burnt out from being a DM/GM. So I'd done D&D, and then I had done Cypher System and Numenera, and I just didn't want to have to create stuff like for other people to go through anymore. Like I'm kind of an anxious person, so to me, I always wanted my sessions to be like the best, so for everyone's having the best time, plan stuff out, make sure it's all good, and it's too stressful. So for a bit, I was just like,
yeah.
let's play solo.
Been there. I like it because the idea of this is like it feels like with a lot of solo RPGs, it is game master healing. It's okay, cool. I'm inserting myself into this story. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to build this story, and no one's gonna tell me that like what I can and can't do on it. And it's from what I have played in solo RPGs, it always feels reinvigorating to me to go, oh, okay, cool. Breathe before hopping into, running a game for someone else.
Yeah.
Again.
And I think that like and correct me if I'm wrong, so with you calling it solo plus, it means that we're not still being GM'd by a formal GM. We're all kind of participating in that role equally. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the idea. So because Realms is set up using a lot of prompts and all the prompts are already included, when you draw cards to outline your scenes, you're drawing cards to create prompts and describe what these scenes are. So there's like a descriptor and a scene type that you get. So it could be something like Shattered Forest or like, I don't know, Disappearing Gloves or something. So you could draw those scenes, and then there's two different ways you can play it. So everyone could take their own scene, and so they describe the scene and set it up and describe what the characters are doing in it. That way everyone's controlling everyone's characters. Or you have it this other way where you do kind of nominate a head person for that chapter, that session. And so they describe the beginning of each scene, and everyone can describe their own characters again.
That's so cool. It's like it's just over the razor's edge of what I'm working on. Like I'm still in like my project, it's called Out of Orbit, and it's still GM'd formally, but like in the rules have been so clear. I'm like, you're a facilitator, you're not God, right? Like this is not about being this all-powerful storyteller, man behind the curtain, perfect. Like you can't see anything behind my GM screen, but much more just like making it comfortable for people to know there's like a rules adjudicator and stuff. But man, like we got to play
The Zone.
A game called The Zone, which we've talked about a lot. That's phenomenal. And it kind of takes that GM full approach, which again is a newer term for me, but like rather than it always being referred to as like GM-less games, which makes you feel like you have nothing to hold on to, GM full again takes more of the approach of like rather than the game being all of the story engine and you just respond to it, instead we become that story engine. And like that to me again also did one of those pivotal moments of rewiring my brain of like how much we're able to include everybody at the table in that experience of telling the story, not just reacting to it. Because when we come from D&D, it's a reactionary thing as a player. You get to react to what the GM is doing, and even though the GM essentially does the same thing, it's perceived much more as they are Bible. They are defined and exact. And to your point, it creates a lot of anxiety for new GMs. They're like, I don't know how to be Matt Mercer. I don't know how to be this like perfect bastion of lore and all of that. So yeah, I'm totally into the genre. I'm totally into what we're doing with the facilitation of storytelling. Tell me a little bit about your story leading up to this point. How did we get here? What prompted you to jump into Zine Quest? And what's your experience with game design up till now?
So again, I'm gonna start way back when. So I'd stopped being a GM and stopped running Cypher System in Numenera. And that was, I think, the year I graduated, or the year. No, I think it was the year I graduated. I stopped doing that. And like the summer of that year, there was this there's this course I think run by the Storytelling Collective or something, where they had multiple different courses, and one of them was to write like an RPG adventure. And so I thought, that's cool. Let me try doing that. And it was like this on-demand kind of course where you can go and watch all these videos. I think it was still timed to like a certain set of weeks, so it gives you a timeline that you've got to do the work in, so you can't just kind of put it off. And then,
kind of like a game jam.
Yeah, it was like that, but with, I guess, advice articles as well on how to do it.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I published that on Itch and on DriveThruRPG, and playtested a bit with some people on Discord, and that was fun and very engaging. So then I think that kicked off kind of the game design part of it as well, because after
Get the itch.
exactly, but after that I then created another game called Creaturecraft, and so that one is all about creating creatures. And so some of these other games are born from like my world building, because I do a lot of world building. So I want games to help me do that. So that's what Creaturecraft was. And then I think a year after that, I then created the first version of Realms, which is actually still on Itch, so people can still buy it if they want. And that one was based in Etria, which is the world that I've been building for like 10 years. So that was fun. I don't know. There was like, I want a way to play out things that happen inside of my world.
Yeah. Well, it's nice too, because like with game design, you don't have to worry about running into walls that are rules, right? It's like you're like, oh well, I'm contained by this. It's no, this is my system. I get to steal from whatever I like, and I get to build my mechanics the way that I want them, to tell the story for the setting that I'm building. And it's so satisfying. Yeah, it really is. Just so satisfying to release and like create this project. This is not the first time Storytelling Collective has come up on the podcast. I believe it was Friday, like our first
I think so.
interview. Not the first one released because it was a long episode, but first interview. Where Friday also told us, hey, you should check out the Storytelling Collective, especially if you're going to be like publishing and stuff, because of all the courses and stuff they had. So listeners, if you are interested, check it out, because we've had a lot of people tell us that it's great. Not sponsored at all. But if they want to,
yeah, totally. Let's talk.
The first taste is free.
So, okay, so you said you're big on lore and you're big on world building. I relate deeply. Like I love that, right? And so when I was making the shift towards less like, perfect curated experience, kind of like and really holding tight to that GM kind of permission in the world. And when I was shifting from that to like giving that away to players and letting them play in it and really flex what the world was going to be, that's difficult. Two, I realized how much touchstones and, the things that inspire us are important for like common language. So when you're bringing somebody to the table for Etria, what are you saying when you're trying to get them to understand the vibe, to have similar cultural touchstones, whether it's, Studio Ghibli kind of things, or referencing specific animes or shows. What are you usually bringing up to people when introducing them?
So it's actually really difficult with realms because the other idea is that I've got this world, so that's what it's based on. But within that world, there are 6 different countries with very different vibes.
Ah,
So the idea is to explain each of those 6 different countries that you could go into. So like one,
yeah.
I've got this kind of Studio Ghibli whimsical. You could try out a pastoral fantasy in there, lush forest. On the other hand, there is this other place called Hodi, which is mountainous region, and they're kind of the home of sci-fi, techno magic. Maybe you could think of them as really snobby elves, except I don't use elves in my game. But that's kind of where they're at. And then, so these are like the 3 most popular, I'd say. And then in the
Yeah.
middle, there is this like vast desert that's a bit more of a post-apocalyptic vibe, where people are living in these large walled cities, and just outside of that is just monsters everywhere. So it's really like
That's so
realms
fun.
is whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. Now, so what kind of in building this out, it looks like you landed on a card engine for the mechanical
Yeah.
side. Can you tell me a little bit about like what it looks like to actively play and interact with the mechanics side of the game?
Yeah, definitely. So the game is essentially split into 3 different sections. You've got outlining your scenes, you've got telling your story, and then you've got some character development. So in outlining your scenes, if this is a new game, a new session, then you pick up 1 card to determine the region that you're in. And prior to this, you'd have had to choose which country you wanted to be in, because there are different sets of prompts for each country.
Okay, cool.
So you choose that country, and then you draw a card to determine the region you're in. So this would be something like you're in a mountainous region, or you're in like the forest, a cliff, a lake, a tundra, etc. And then you kind of get into the more proper bit of the gameplay, where you draw 3 cards. And so those are your scene types. And so each of those scenes, I've like got it, so I'm referencing it over here.
No, you're good.
So those could be something like you could get a laboratory, a settlement, or like a bag of money. So you could draw those as scene cards. Then you draw another 3, and these are the descriptors. So descriptors are things like, they're just adjectives. So revealing, shattered, frozen could be the descriptors. And then you have to mix those up. So match them to whatever you think makes sense, and then arrange all of those scenes. So you might end up with, and I've got to remember the words I said. So let's say like a frozen bag of money. You might have a shattered laboratory. And what was the other word? A revealing settlement. And then
love. Oh no, continue. Sorry.
I was going to say, then you arrange those into whatever order you want, and you mark one of those as having like a dice-based encounter. And then you would go through it and tell the story. That's when you really get to grips with just talking or writing it out, or however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I like that because there's the simple like okay, draw situations, but you've taken it a step further to add even more interaction and variety to your randomization. Meaning, of course, like all solo games, it's infinitely replayable, but like it just gives you those extra details to really kind of cement in. This is where we're at. We are in the frozen laboratory, or whatever. And it's just nice because the more details I'm given, like obviously the better I can see the scene. But like for me, I've got like a very colorful imagination. Some people aren't able to see, visuals. I can. So every detail that I'm given, I'm just like, okay, painting that picture. All right, cool. I got it figured out. Awesome. So I love a good randomization system, and I think this one is quite well put together. Just
Well, and I
hearing you
think
talk
that
about it.
when you're prompting players like that, it's again, you were not necessarily GMing in the situation, like the game kind of facilitates those prompts. But what I think is really fun is you get, I guess, you as the game designer kind of get to have this experience uniquely of what the heck are people going to do with these prompts, and like they're going to put things together that you don't expect, and it really creates a diverse world that is unexpected and unique, and truly the players, not just ours as designers. Um, so when it comes to like the spectrum of like defined flavor and setting and tone to like complete gonzo, any weird thing can happen. Where would you say Realms kind of lies on how you've built it out?
So I'd say it's definitely towards the gonzo anything can happen. Because
Yeah,
although it's set in my world, it is very light touch. So there's like a page for each of the different countries that you can read up on. There's maps in it. But ultimately, it's really about those scenes and those descriptor prompts. So you could
that's so cool.
realistically have your idea of what Hodi, like the mountainous country, is, and it can be completely different from my idea. And that's also really cool to me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Have you I'm going to sound like a broken record to DJ and other people, but have you played Microscope by chance?
No, but I've heard of it. I've
Okay.
looked it up. I just haven't actually played it, but I really like
It's
the
totally
idea
fine.
of it.
It's awesome. I've also mostly just like read through it, and I'm hacking it for a couple different projects right now, and it was super influential on my current project. And there's a lot of the way that you're kind of taking a macro approach and then zooming into these specific scenes and stuff that reminds me of that. You're very much doing your own thing. But that ability to operate, on world building and macro level, and then intimately in moments and scenes and stuff, um, that is for so many people entirely new. And like Microscope is kind of the only touchstone I have that does that well. So it's exciting to see somebody doing that juxtaposition, but completely with a different strategy and taking on another approach to it. So I'm actually like excited that you're not that familiar with Microscope, because it means you're really doing something else with it, based on everything I've heard. And this is really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the lead up to launching Kickstarter. So you've had a couple versions of Realms. Um, when did that story start? And then when did you decide I want to participate in something like Zine Quest and crowdfunding, and I want to re-release whatever this officially is, this earlier concept, and take another crack at it?
So I think I've only had one previous version of Realms, and I think that released in like summer of 2023. And
Okay.
then January came around. Well, January, maybe February as well. And I just thought, I think I could do more with it. Because up until that point, I'd been doing very much like sprints, game design sprints, where I would dedicate my life for like a couple of weeks to just doing a game and creating a game and finishing it off. And really what that meant is that I actually relied a lot on AI to help me generate some of that content, which I feel is going to get me flamed, but because the RPG community does not like AI.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what, it's not really put together well. Like the design was there, the layout still looks good in my opinion, but because I was using AI to generate some of the prompts for that initial version, it wasn't very cohesive. Like it didn't
Yeah.
feel very put together. So I wanted to do something different. And that was January last year. And my plan was to get a different release on itch by the summer, where I playtested it a bit more, written a bit extra, and just kind of clean it up, tidied it, make it actually cohesive. And then
Yeah.
Zine Quest happened. And then on like some Discord RPG design groups, there are people talking about, like, I guess, doing postmortems of their zine quests.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, so 90% of zine quests get funded. Maybe I'll just like give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so like summer of last year, I decided, okay, I'm gonna try actually for Zine Quest and extend this and just see what I can do with a longer time frame.
Yeah, and I mean the thing about doing a campaign is ideally having as much of that. There's two approaches. Either people have the game done and it's just a pre-order, right? Like that's the strategy, and they're looking to like retroactively fund what they did, or they're pitching a game that is whole cloth, not really done, and they're trying to see if people are interested in it and if they should invest in it at all. And I mean, obviously you had another version of the game already out, so you kind of revisited it and decided to bring it to the world. What shifted between version 1 and version 2, and where, like, other than just like some of those AI prompts, is that the main? Are you like redoing a lot of the tables yourself, or what are the shifts between version 1 and version 2 that you're excited about?
So, yeah, so there's a lot of the prompts. So I completely redid all of the prompts. Like, I put it all in a massive Excel spreadsheet, and I like spent time just staring at that spreadsheet and trying to make sure everything really matched how each of the countries feel, because I really wanted the prompts to go together well. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then it's also doing like the human-made art part of this as well, because I did use AI art in my original one. So now instead there's no AI art in this new version. And there's art that I've done, which, I mean, I'm trying to sell the game, but it's not the best. That's human-made, at least.
Oh, it looks awesome. Yeah, and also just to the AI point, you know, we've talked about it here and there on the podcast. We've talked about it in different circles. And it's like, to be clear to our listeners too, it's like we don't support using AI art and like, you know, generative AI in general, but it's like, I totally understand it, especially as a graphic designer. You know, I spent years always trying to get ahead on technology and tools and stuff. And I was super excited about all of it when it was first dropping, and I was playing with it and using it in my private games. And I think it was exciting for a lot of people. And I'm really grateful that I was not producing products at that point in time. Because to your point, a lot of people do get flamed for it because, you know, it's seen as exploitative, and it is, because the models do steal. And it's like, ideally, there's a world where these kind of tools could be used to make, you know, creating stuff like this actually ethical and super helpful. But unfortunately, that's just not where we're at. And so it's like, I commend you for like making that shift and recognizing that, because like, I remember how easy it was to be like, oh man, I need a roller table, and bam, now I've got a roller table. Right? Like it's such a shift, because like the minute it becomes that easy, it's like a drug, legitimately. It was for a while. I'm like, I'm weaning myself off of using ChatGPT for anything. And it took way longer than I'm proud of to get that out of my system, because it was so easy.
Right.
And so I'm super excited to know, like, you've been able to put yourself into this and truly make this unique for you, because like what you said, like about those roller tables not really scratching the itch in the right way. You know, like that was so like real for me in the AI art that I generated and used in private games. And even when I was leading up to my first Zine Quest, I was still contemplating using it. And like, I nuked everything that I had used, because two reasons. One, I felt like a fraud. Like I just did, you know, and two, it was like the quality just wasn't there. It felt a little bit, you know, got like cobbled together and not what it needed to be. So that's a little spiel on AI art, and to your point, hopefully that comforts you a little bit, because I understand what you're going through.
Yeah, definitely. I also need to mention the cover art that people see that's on the Kickstarter and that will be on the book. that one isn't made by me. That's made by
Yeah.
Alice Williams. So I work at a university, and last year, like well, every year, we have a kind of graduate design show. And so last year, during the graduate design show, I walked around and I kind of hired Alice based on what she presented there. So it felt like a good opportunity, even though I didn't know if the Kickstarter was going to work or not. I was just like, I'll just pay this money myself to actually support like an up and coming artist that can do art better than me and make it look beautiful.
Yeah, I in my first project, I hired out like a handful of things just solely because they were in the categories of like character design and consistency that I just wasn't comfortable with, right? Like as an illustrator, I was like, I'm not good at drawing space stations. Please, somebody else do this. Like I can't, and it's fun to be able to collaborate with people like that. It's fun to have the funds to be able to collaborate with people like that. And it's really hard to do all of the art yourself in this space. So I commend you for even doing any of it. So like you're saying the pieces throughout the page are all you, but the lead graph. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I love this style. Like even if you feel like you're still growing in terms of things as an illustrator, like the style and the tone is really coming through, and that's the stuff I think that is going to win people over, and they will happily overlook whatever thing that you're seeing that you hate because they don't see it. That's exciting. Well, yeah, tell me a bit about what you're looking to do after this project. Like what do you want to do with Realms? Do you want to continue to develop it? Do you have a million other game projects that you're looking at? Like where are you at in terms of both supporting Realms going forward and your game design career?
So yeah, I think I'll do a bit of both. I think when I initially had the idea to run the Zine quest, I was going a bit crazy in that I'm also like I'm a designer by trade. I also teach design now. So I'm like an experience designer / service designer. So I work with intangible experiences and try to design for that. And I really love the idea of printing out physical cards that people could use instead of a standard roll, like instead of a standard deck of cards. But the cost to do that, I'm not sure anyone would back it at that cost.
Ooh.
So this is like, that's like a future, maybe if Realms becomes this great thing that people love, then I'll try again and try to do it that way, which would be the great way I'd want it. But on a wider scale, I actually think my game designs focus more on world building. And so the idea is I'm going to create a bunch of little games all about designing things for your world. So like I started Creature Craft, and then I released an updated version of that called Glimpse. And then I've got in the back of my mind, I've also got this idea for a plant building game where you kind of describe new plants that exist in this world that you've created. And then I've also got plans for a cooking game as well, along that same idea.
Oh man, you're really scratching that cozy itch.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's awesome.
So I think eventually the idea would be have all of those mini games put into one larger book, because you do see out there like world building guides or helps for world building, but what I haven't seen is them turn it into a game as much.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. So tell us a little bit about the actual encounter mechanics. We've got the world building level. We've got like the ability to collaborate and set the table. We get to choose the realm. And then now we're actually in those encounters that we set up by way of random generation and prompting. What is the actual like confirmation system? Because if the cards are the engine for the world building, are they also for the encounter? What are we doing there?
So no. So you go through this as you're telling the story. You hit a scene that you've marked to be an encounter scene, and then you kind of dive into that. And then we've got dice pools. So the idea is that you gather a set number of dice depending on the difficulty of the situation that you're in. And that difficulty is determined by the skills that you have. And again, it's very broad and vague, the kind of skills that you have. So I'll just give you an example.
A la Cypher style, like nice blanket. skills.
Exactly. So like a negative skill you could have is like being stealthy on dry land, because maybe you're made like you're an amphibious kind of being. So if you had a negative skill in a certain encounter, then it would increase the difficulty and you would get less dice to be able to solve that. So you gather these dice that you have, and then you roll all of them and you assign them to different action slots. So there are 4 different action slots. There's the basic action, there's tool, shield, and chance. And each of these slightly affects the dice that you rolled. So in a tool, you add +1 to the dice roll. In shield, you add +2. But with a shield, you can only ever tie. You can't succeed in a round within that encounter. And then with chance, you flip the dice. Yeah, more defensive.
Yeah, that's
That
really
is
cool.
so cool.
Yeah, I like that.
I've never heard of something like that.
Good.
That really scratches something in my
it's
brain,
fun.
because I love the tangible, like, quirky aspects of the dice experience. Because like a lot of stuff, it's like we play in VTTs and digitally, but like the idea of like, yeah, take all your dice and just flip them over is like, ooh, hold on a sec, that's weird. That's like, I don't know. That really scratches my brain in a weird way. Very cool. So like round over round, is it kind of gonna feel more like a traditional RPG in that way, where like we're going up against this encounter? How does like the collaborative non-GM'd approach kind of occur in those scenes for the problem that we're facing and what we're trying to do to overcome it?
Okay, so there are 2 different ways that you can play if you're playing with other people. You can kind of stick to the solo individual encounters if you're all approaching a problem with a different angle. So say that you were... Maybe you're all trying to run away from something, but one of you chooses to kind of, I don't know, go underground. Someone else is up in the trees or something. Versus if you were all trying to convince one person together in a combined effort. So if you're doing it that way, more collaboratively, then you all get your own dice pools and you're just facing one challenge die. So in each of the rounds, you roll the challenge die, and then you have to beat that die roll. So you have to have a higher roll to succeed. If you have the same roll, you tie. And if you have less, then you fail that round. And you're trying to get more successes than failures overall. So if everyone succeeds together, like if everyone has more successes than failures, overall the group succeeds.
Interesting. Okay, so it's very like almost like a group skill test against it. It's not necessarily like round over round combat or anything like that.
No, so there are still multiple rounds. So it's just how many times can you beat that dice?
Yeah. Right. That's super cool. I like that. It's like it's like we get to go do a little dice mini game to resolve the conflict within the world that we just set up. That's so fun. Okay, that leads me to my next question. Character creation. So if we're world building, but we also play as characters and scenes, how do we bridge the gap? And how do we make our characters? Who do we embody? Who owns the characters? Is it troop style? Is it individualized? What does that look like?
So I think it's individualized. Everyone has their own character. And so you create characters, again, from a cipher system. You create characters. At the end of it, you get out a sentence. And so you read out your sentence to everyone in the group, and that's your introduction to each other. But to create a character, you can just roll through all of them. So you can roll, I think it's either a d6 or 2d6, depending on which aspect of the character you're deciding on. But you've got a name, you have an archetype, you've got a belonging, which is what I call the different countries, because I wanted to feel this more of like a nice, cozy vibe. You've got a belonging rather than a country. And you have a nature, which is the name for things like races or species. Yeah. And then you also roll on a motivation as well. So it gives you something to work for.
It's so funny because like when I started out in 3.5 and stuff, the idea of even rolling stats and it being randomized bugged me so much. I hated it. I'm like, I want to control it. I want to make like this perfectly curated character that is this really cool concept and all this stuff. And nowadays I'm like, roll me whatever. Let's just like see what happens. I don't know what I'm gonna play. I don't know what I'm gonna be. So it's so fun. Like I feel like and freeing for a lot of people when they make that shift towards more randomized stuff because of the unexpected and the creativity that comes with it. You put it out. Sorry, you put it out back in 2023, right? The first version of it. So you've had a few years with this project, almost just about 2 years now with it. What has been like playtesting looked like? What's been feedback? How has the game evolved based on that feedback? And then, you know, have you played it a lot just yourself? I'm assuming because a solo game, you can playtest without anybody around you.
Yeah, so this actually brings it back to a question you asked a while ago, which was why did you make the switch from just solo to solo plus?
Yeah.
And so before I even went bigger than 2 players, I went from 1 to 2 so that I could get my partner, my fiance, to play with me.
Good.
So
That's great.
the original Realms is actually 1 or 2 players. And then I wanted to roll it out more because I think it could be fun to play with more people. And so I've been playtesting it with me, playtesting with my partner, with my friends, and then also with people on Discord. And so those are where some of the quotes come from on that Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
And so I think the way that things have changed, it's mostly been an accessibility kind of thing, where people are saying this is a little bit confusing, maybe rearrange these pages or use a different font, maybe don't have italics because in this font it doesn't look right. I think, I really think it was mostly accessibility things that people were saying. The core game didn't really change that much. I think last year I changed the name for some of the actions so that they were a bit more clear or evocative. So I went from like buffer to shield and from magic to chance. So just I think some names and some slight accessibility things.
It's what I'm finding with playtesting on my own is like there's 2 things that can happen. I mean, with anything, people are really good at pointing out what's wrong. They're less good at giving you the right solution for it.
Yeah.
And so like every time I've done playtesting, it's like I listen really intensely to what, irks them or rubs them the wrong way. But so many times we're so drawn to the familiar. And so like in playtesting, people will be like, oh, we'll make it more like this and that and the other because they're referencing their play experiences in the past. And that might heavily differ from the play space you're trying to encourage. And man, playtesting is like, we need to do a whole episode just on playtesting and have a bunch of people on because like it's a whole mess of worms. And I mean, I'm doing it right now. So that's why I was curious about it because you've had some time with it. And I don't know. It's hard to go from those core groups that know how to play games with you to then just like random people on the internet and just seeing what they think. But hopefully it's overall been a positive experience. I know that playtesting can be really difficult sometimes, but
I would say that I have had some of those experiences where a playtester comes back and they're like, I think something funny that happened is before they playtested it, one person was like, what kind of feedback do you want? And I was like, anything, any kind of feedback. And then they came back and they're like, well, you see, you're doing like a prompts-based system, and I would not do that if I were you. And I was like, okay, so maybe not any kind of
we're having a different conversation. Yeah. Yep. Oh, man.
Redo game from ground up. Thanks for the advice. Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, goodness. I mean, that is how because, well, especially if it's not the type of game that the playtester is looking for, right? So they're not going to give good advice for the game you're building in that situation. So giving some guide rails as far as like what feedback you would like within this system, what do you like and not dislike? Not within making it more like,
Yep.
Dungeons and Dragons. Within this scenario. So, but what can you do?
Yeah, exactly. I had a lot of playtesters that hadn't necessarily played solo games, but were looking to get into it, and so they wanted to try out my game.
I am very excited to get in and try this out, and it's going on my what is it called? My TBR list slash to be played, because like I really want to bridge that gap between a solo experience and what I currently do, because I'm a social gamer, right? Like I enjoy the collaborative storytelling piece so much more than just like wanting to go and do something alone. And this seems like it'd be good to where like I'd play it with people and then be like, okay, no, I just want to go do it by myself. Princess, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, Realms Etria is available right now, or well, it's funding right now. The first version of it is available right now on Edge. But it's funding right now on Kickstarter as a part of Zine Quest. Zine Month is something we are so excited to be featuring many artists from this month of February. We've got our own projects. We've got links in the bio. Please check them out. Back projects like this, because your $5, your $10, your whatever that you put into these projects makes them come into reality, and they make, just speaking from experience here, it makes my day. Every single backer in there is a real person that gives a crap about something I'm doing, and it means a lot. So go ahead, check out these projects, check out Realms Etria, back it, help push this up over that goal and then further, so that we can see some cool stuff come from Princess. Princess, thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.
That'll be it for us for today. You can expect more during the month of February. We're going to probably be doing around 2 episodes a week, so it's a lot more than normal from us. And then we'll go back to our normal every other week schedule. You can find everything in the links in the description at oneshotstavern.com. And that's all from us. We'll see you next time.